That means time for a grim stream of Perilous lore. Talking about High Elves some more. Probably finishing them up today. it, as I was prepping for stuff today, I realized there was more and more and more and more that still needed to be go over for these guys. Just talking about Ulthuan, and there's just so much. There's just so much going on. I love it. So we will be talking about the Inner Kingdoms of Ulthuan today, and talking about our kind of last couple of major players in the High Elf Society. Today we'll finish up talking about Caledor, one of my favorites, and Finubar the Seafarer, the current Seafarer. Say Seabearer? I think I put that in my notes on accident. Seabearer, Finubar, the current Phoenix King, and how he is pretty different from a lot of Phoenix Kings from the past. Today, I'm going to skip over my Black Library recommendation for the week this week, just because there's so much to go over with the High Elves. I think that'll take an hour as it is, and yeah, we'll take a look. We'll start, of course, with what's gaming. Give some people time to join in here. I'd love to hear what other people are gaming, if they're gaming at all at this time, or just like what people are reading about. Maybe with being with the pandemic, not a lot of people can't game in person, so a lot of people have been reading and catching up, filling in their knowledge about fluff type stuff, taking a look at learning more about the lore, which obviously is what I've been doing. In addition to that, we had an awesome time recording some more episodes of Settling the Southlands, which has started now. If you're watching this on the YouTube after it's come out, we should have at least episode 0 up on the YouTube. I do believe that might be up, but it is certainly on the Patreon at this time. Episode 0 called Nice to Know You, where we get to know the 4 characters. Talk a little bit more about now. Danny is playing Bethan. I forget her last name. Is her sheet right there? Bethan Bauer is our human physician, and her kind of mantra is health is wealth. And we have Tim is playing going against the grain a bit and not playing what he's often referred to as playing a... I always lose the word just as I'm about to say it. Not offensive, but kind of like an obnoxious character. I forget the word people say that he plays. He is not. He's playing a dwarf merchant, Gertrude or Gertie to his friends, and he is a delight. He talks with a voice similar, pretty much Watto from Star Wars Episode 1, which is fantastic. And Gertie is kind of hilarious. And then we have Alex returning. He is playing a human noble from Middenheim named Heinrich von Baer, who is inadvertently probably the funniest character we've had on the network. He doesn't... And it's so perfect because he doesn't try to be funny all the time. Like, Heinrich himself is not making jokes. It's the scenarios that Alex comes up with for Heinrich. He is the firstborn son of a noble from Middenheim, but he's kind of been sent on this sort of quest to hopefully not come back, so the second son can take over instead, because Heinrich is objectionable. That's the word. Tim is not playing an objectionable character. It's Alex's turn. Heinrich is extremely objectionable and amazing. And then we have new to the network, Jess, who is playing just the high energy, super fun to listen to Liliana Pineswoop, a halfling rat catcher with an average but vicious dog named Vicious. And Liliana is the perfect foil to Heinrich and his noble stature and everything, where she just doesn't care, and she's going to do what she wants all the time, and she's hilarious also. That has been so much fun recording. We can't wait for you guys to hear the story begin. Now that we've got to know the characters a little bit, for those, if you haven't seen our video on YouTube explaining our plans for that, it will be every other week on Patreon until we have a good enough backlog where you feel comfortable releasing it weekly. Especially because we're only recording that show monthly. in what we call marathon sessions, recording a few episodes at a time. If we miss one of those, we don't want to have the potential for our weekly release I mean, we don't want to miss a week. So it's going to be every other week until we have enough in the bank, as we say, so we can release it weekly going forward. And then on YouTube, we are going to release the video version on YouTube once a month. So everybody's going to be able to enjoy this. Just you'll be able to enjoy it on a much faster track if you are a patron. And the podcast version will only be available to patrons as well, and that will all be at the $10 level and up. Super excited. And then as we get further through the campaign, probably near the time of wrapping it up, once we get into like the final things, the actual campaign itself will be available to patrons as well. And I think it'll probably go up on Drive-Thru RPG, as it's at this point it's 70 pages in a Google Doc, and I've got a lot more to write. It is sprawling as an open world campaign, good old sandbox. Other than that, for what's gaming, of course on Mondays we have the Power Phase right here on this Twitch where we play Marvel Crisis Protocol. Last week Tim and Charlie had a brawl where I think every character was either KO'd or injured by the end of the game. Tomorrow, the 19th of April, Chuck is back one more time. I get his schedule has allowed him to play, so we're trying to fit him in a whole bunch before he potentially changes his schedule again, because that's kind of always on the horizon. And Danny is going to be going up against him, and not really sure. I know Chuck said he's playing Asgard. I think he's trying the list he played last week one more time. I'm not sure what Danny's leaning towards yet. Hell yeah, she says in the chat. I think she was planning on just going with a larger team. It's 17 points. Chuck has 4 characters with Asgard, so I think Danny was potentially going to play a team that has 5 or 6 characters at that level. She's in the chat. Have you decided how many you're going to go with yet? Do you have any idea there? Or, I'm sorry, do you have any idea what affiliation you might be going with? That's what I was trying to say. I'll give her a moment. I know there's a little bit of a lag with the chat. See if she has any idea. Nope. All right. Well, I mean, if you want to go cheap, if you want to go bodies, Guardians, even though their affiliation ability sucks, they're really good for throwing a bunch of bodies down. Whatever's strong against Asgard. I don't know. I don't know the game well enough to say, oh, this affiliation is better against that affiliation. But I feel like with Asgard, either you want to throw a bunch of status effects on them to get them to waste their affiliation ability to shake instead of healing, or just don't bother with status effects at all. But then you're letting him heal a damage every round, every turn. So I feel like either way is good. Maybe Defenders. Doctor Strange expensive though. I really hope Defenders get a secondary leader at some point that's not 5 points, just because he's expensive. But they have a lot of 3 points, especially once Luke Cage and Iron Fist come out. They'll have a lot of 3-point choices to fill in those slots. But right now it's a really expensive affiliation, other than like Valkyrie and Hawkeye at 3 points. So it's hard to, if you want to field the big list, Guardians would be your way to go, or potentially Avengers, just because they have so much choice, or Cabal, again, so much choice. But yeah, a lot of things you could do. Maybe do a Criminal Syndicate so you can run a Kingpin and throw guys into other guys, because we know how much Charlie loves that when it happens to him. Throw Thor into people, just because. Throws wouldn't be as good against his Asgard list, because they're all size 2, so your throws wouldn't do as much damage, but throwing characters into other characters is always a good move. Pretty much always. Or you could go a real control list and play a lot of things that have pushes and whatnot. Would be pretty cool. All right, so we are going to jump right into, I guess not jump right into 10 minutes in. Let's go take a look at our lore focus of the week and talk about the Inner Kingdoms of Ulthuan. So here's our map. For those of you watching the video version, our Inner Kingdoms surround the aptly named Inner Sea. We have Eataine, Saphery, Avelorn, Ellyrion, and Caledor. I'm going to go the same order I did last time, starting kind of at like 4 o'clock. If we're looking at this like a clock. The southeast uh, portion of the island, and we'll start with Saphery, partly because we already covered Saphery a little bit in the first episode of High Elves. I talked about Sword Masters and Lore Masters specifically, but Saphery itself, here is the crest of the kingdom, the flag. I think I used this a little bit last week with like Cathik and Tyrannok, because there just weren't too many images out there, and I don't want to use images from things like DeviantArt, just because I don't want people to get upset that I'm using their artwork. The older official artwork's a bit safer, I think. I don't know. But these crests, I believe, are from like a heraldry book they put out. They did a few of these, I think it was during 8th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, where they had drawings with all different, showing the different heraldry and livery and things like that of different nations. They did one for the Empire, of course. I think I might have that one. I can't see it at the moment, or I think my brother had that. They did one for Skaven, which is kind of interesting. They did one for High Elves, and I think that may have been it. Maybe one for Bretonnia. I doubt they gave Bretonnia that much love. But these are cool, and they were just kind of more fluff books. I wish I'd had these now, but at the time I was like, I don't have the money for that. That's another $30 I just don't have. So this is the flag for Saphery has a hand holding a crescent moon, pointing with like the points up, and it's doing almost like the rocker symbol as it holds it. And then there's a star above, like a starburst above that. And it's on a field of stars. The black that fades to deep blue at the bottom, with some star points scattered about. Nice little symbol. And Saphery is, of course, the realm of magics. Saphery, as a kingdom, is a land infused with magic. It's another kind of sparsely populated kingdom, which most of Ulthuan is, because the elves are in decline and there just aren't as many as there used to be. They're devastated by war constantly. But Saphery is known for eccentric mages that live here. Most of them live in like vineyards and villas scattered about the land, and it's one of the beautiful region again, mostly because the way that it has so much magic about that things happen. It also increases the amount of crazy magical beasts that live in this area. Things like, I mean, not necessarily the beasts are magical, but they're created by this fusion of things like griffins, giant eagles, things like that. Sometimes manticores, chimera once in a while. Those are more with the chaos waste, but manticores like to live in the mountains, the Anuli Mountains that ring the island as well. And then, of course, here is the White Tower of Hoeth, Hoeth being the elven god of knowledge. More about that in part 1 of the High Elves. I think it was episode 15. This is episode 17, in case you're wondering. As we move around the island, like I said, we're going to breeze over Saphery just because we talked about that already. As we continue our counterclockwise motion around, we come to Avelorn, which, again, we talked about Avelorn a little bit back in episode 1, where I talked about Ellyrion, the current Everqueen, and how the Everqueen is a position very similar to the Phoenix King, where they are one of the rulers of the land, and they're kind of more the spiritual guide, whereas the Phoenix King is the like martial and kind of like everyday business guide to the realm, where they rule in tandem, but they typically aren't together. We know the current Phoenix King and Everqueen are not like a couple. The Everqueen Ellyrion is with Teclis, the mighty warrior. At least sometimes, at least we think it's kind of a rumor that they are like an item. But the Everqueen is there to kind of act as another source of knowledge and wisdom for those decisions that affect the whole realm. And Ellyrion is very proficient in her job. Has been known to actually go to the Phoenix Court and speak with nobles there, and sometimes not even speak with them. We'll talk about more when we get to Finubar himself, where there has been some talk about how he isn't fit for the job of Phoenix King because he's too busy going places. He likes to go check out. He's called the Seafarer for a reason. He spent more in his early years as the Phoenix King. king, he spent more time away from Ulthuan than actually ruling it, and let more of the day-to-day stuff up to his highest counselors. And there was some talk of not so much mutiny, but saying that he wasn't fit. And Alariel showed up, and she just stared him down until they shut up, and was like, "No, he's fine," kind of thing. Like I said, we'll talk more about Finubar later. But the crest for Avelorn is a bit different than others, where it shows, I assume, is the Ever Queen herself, with a tear, would be a tear of Isha, is the goddess of like light and life. We talked a little bit about back in the first part, and she's holding a heart in one hand and a sword in the other. The sword pointed down to the ground, and the heart is dripping blood. Kind of a cool crest. And then we have a rune in the corner. I don't remember what that rune means. It might just be, maybe it's for life, or it might just mean Avelorn. I'm looking at an older book here that has more about the runes, if I remember correctly. It might just tell me what that rune means. That might be even older book that has that. They had a cool, I think it was the 6th edition book, had a page about, oh, here it is. Well, this is the 7th edition army book, and then one of the pages has a bunch of elf runes. Let's see if I can find that one real quick. Oh, there it is. That is the Quilisha. It is the tears of Isha, sorrow, mercy, endurance, and mourning for lost children, is what that rune there means. Did we have a rune on Saphery? I don't think so. No, we did not. But with Avelorn, we can't forget to mention the Sisters of Avelorn, also known as the Handmaidens of the Everqueen, as they move up in the ranks. So the Sisters of Avelorn are a like cadre of warrior women, kind of like Amazons type idea, where they are handpicked from around the island, the continent, and chosen for this role. And they basically become, they're kind of like the White Lions are to the Phoenix King. The Sisters of Avelorn are to the Everqueen, where they are her bodyguards and elite warriors. And they have awesome magical bows that are really cool that fire arrows of Isha. Let me see if I find that. I think they have a special name for these bows that I can't remember off the top of my head. Luckily, I remember my books this time, so I can take a look. Let's see. They have the Bow of Avelorn. How did I forget that? So magical bows that fire magical arrows that are better at piercing armor and everything. And the sisters are just kind of awesome. They are the best warriors in Avelorn, and if they move up in the ranks, they can become handmaidens of the Everqueen, and they become her direct bodyguards that are with her all the time, and they are like the preeminent warriors of this realm. And it's seen as the highest of honors for a female elf to become a sister of Avelorn. They are taken away from their families basically to fulfill this job, but they are totally fine with it because it is, like I said, it's the highest honor, and they become a keeper of life and light. So they're very, very cool. They were new in 8th edition. I wish I had gotten some of these models. I just never was able to, unfortunately. But they looked really cool with their magic bows that glow blue. Pretty neat stuff. Alrighty, as we move around more. Oh, and Avelorn is almost completely covered in forests. Almost forgot to mention that. And they revere Isha here, of course, more than any other elven god. As we move around counterclockwise, continuing, we're now on the northwestern portion of the Inner Sea. We have Ellyrion, or Ellyrion, which is known for the horses. As we see on their crest, shows a Pegasus, rampant Pegasus, with clouds with crashing lightning behind them. Another field of black fading to blue at the bottom. And then we have some stylized mountains below this Pegasus. Of course, being a winged horse, in case people don't know that term. And then we have another rune here. Let's see if I can find it on my chart. This looks kind of like pi, the symbol for pi, with another spike coming up from the bottom. I don't see this one at a glance. Looks similar to for Eataine, the storm, wrath, gently falling rain that brings eternal sleep. Looks similar to that, and makes a lot of sense with what's pictured there. Yeah, I don't see that exact one. It's interesting. No. All right, so I'm gonna go with that one. So Ellyrion is known for Great Plains. They're the horse lords of the High Elves. They say it's better to harm the brother of Ellyrion than his horse, because they will, pay back with swift justice and that kind of thing. Ellyrion has some cool magical things going on in its land, where these great plains stretch on for hundreds of miles, and it's twisted by magic to a point where only the Illyrian horse masters know the secret ways through. So traveling through Illyrion can be extremely dangerous because you can get lost going exactly where you're going. They described it as you can walk in a straight line across these plains, and your destination will never get closer. In fact, can get even further away as you're walking along if you're not walking along the proper magical paths. So Illyrion is these magical wards help to protect it, as this is a place where the Dark Elves of Nagaroth often attack through. We bring up our map one more time. We see Illyrion is across the mountains from Nagarythe, which we know is our closest kingdom to Nagaroth. And if the Dark Elves make it through Nagarythe, which is not that difficult because nobody really lives there, there are some of the Shadow Warriors we talked about last episode, but they can find the pass through the mountains, because you can't cross over the mountains. That's almost impossible. You have to find tunnels and things through the mountains. It even says in the one book that no High Elf has ever made it to the peak summit of any of the mountains of the Anuli range and lived to tell the tale, which is crazy because there are probably thousands of mountains in this massive range, and they've never been to the top. They say the tops of these mountains pierce the clouds, and there are rumors that there is a whole kingdom above the cloud line of these mountains where gods or godlike creatures live, which would be really cool to explore, but I don't believe GW's ever added any more than those cryptic descriptions. But Illyrion here, those defenses help keep them safer from invasion. Illyrion is often where the first real steps of a campaign into Ulthuan happen from Nagaroth. Because they are the horse lords and they know horses better than anybody, they are, of course, famed for their knights. We have what's called Illyrian Reavers, which are what we would call fast cavalry in Warhammer fantasy battle parlance, where the Silver Helms, which is kind of more of the heavy cavalry of the elven armies, can come from any province. They are just nobles that are trained as cavalry with spear and shield and heavy armor. The Illyrian Reavers are best known for their quickness and their skill with spears and bow from horseback. I've never actually ridden a horse. I'd love to. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to fire a bow from a running horse. And the Illyrian Reavers are just experts at this, some of the best in the world. The cool thing about them is that typically fast cavalry don't wear barding, armor for their horses because it slows them down too much. That's more of the heavy cavalry job. But elves have perfected the smithing of a metal called Ithilmar, which is kind of like the Warhammer equivalent of mithril from things like Lord of the Rings, where it is just as tough as steel, even harder potentially, but it is much lighter. So their horses can be just as swift while wearing Ithilmar barding, and have that protection from some armor. So Illyrian Reavers are really cool in the battles game. The tabletop game, it was just the best. I loved Illyrian Reavers. They were such a pain. They were really good at shooting and taking hits, and they could still charge in with spears and do some damage. And of course, as fast cavalry, they had the same rules as every other, where if they fled from like a charge, they could rally for free, and then they could just go back and shoot. And they were incredibly fast. I think their horses had movement 9, so they didn't care if they ran away. They were going to get back in the thick of it real quick. I want to find that and double check that I'm correct, that their horses were movement 9, but I'm pretty certain. If I can find the right page, yes they did, movement 9. I just want to double check I was saying the name of the medal right. Thilmar, yes. So Ellyrion Reavers are really cool. The book I talked about a couple weeks ago with the elves, the defenders of Ulthuan, followed a couple of brothers that were from Illyrian. So we learned a bit more about that realm in that book. Very cool. Next up for the realms, we have a lot of people's favorite, Caledor, which is known for its dragons, of course. We see in their crest, we have this curled up dragon. It's a red dragon spewing fire before a moon. And then we have some starry sky behind it with some clouds. I'm going to try to find those runes. There's another rune here, so I got to try to find that rune page. I keep putting down the book. Go back to it. So we got it looks like a T with a squiggly S below it. This is the rune of Serathai, the rune of the world dragon, symbolizing defiance and unyielding. Which makes a lot of sense for the dragon print, the what we call the dragon princes from Caledor, what this realm was most known for. Back in the day, when Ulthuan was a much more thriving nation, back thousands of years ago in the past of the Warhammer world, they rode dragons. That's why they're called dragon princes. Caledor is a large kingdom. We're going to bring our map back up real quick here, where it's interesting, just looking at the map, it seems like it's the only one that actually spans the inner and outer realms. There's no outer kingdom across from Caledor. There's not, similar to Tiranoc, there's not a lot of land that's not mountainous. And in these mountains of Caledor are where the dragons slumber. And as we've gone, as things have progressed through time, the dragons have gotten more and more tired, and they spend more and more time sleeping. They're harder to wake, and fewer elves can ride dragons into battle. So the dragon princes have had to instead ride horses, which I'm sure they wouldn't tell anybody, but I'm sure they hate that idea that the current dragon princes don't always get to ride dragons. But these mountains are treacherous because of these dragons. Even though they're slumbering most of the time, they can be woken. Most mages of Caledor specialize in dragon song to wake the dragons, to bring them to war. But certain of these mages are more adept at this, and they are what's called dragon mages. There we go. Close the wrong thing there. Let's keep that up. And we want to close the map is what I'm looking for. Actually, I don't need to close the map right now. And the dragon mages are, not only are they attuned to magic, just naturally, they're also attuned to the dragons themselves and are known for their ability to wake dragons with but a whisper of the dragon's name, which is pretty amazing. Typically, they can only wake the youngest of dragons, known as sun dragons, named for their fiery spirit and their willingness to wake and go to war, much more than any other dragon out there. And the dragon mages that are strong enough of will and personality to go wake these dragons, invariably also wield fire magic that kind of fits their personality as very outgoing and aggressive. Dragon Mages are super cool. I loved it when they added these to the Warhammer Fantasy Battles game. It was just, I think it was the first time we had a hero. They were a hero choice that could ride a dragon, and it was just super cool that you could play them at a lower point level and have a dragon on the table, which typically was reserved for the bigger games because dragons are really expensive. So once they added Sun Dragons with Dragon Mages, it was awesome. I famously had a frustrating time playing my brother with dwarves, of course, and my Dragon Mage charged a dwarf cannon or something, some kind of dwarf war machine, and it took rounds and rounds, and I could not kill these 3 dwarf crew. Between my dragon attacks and my mage's attacks, I just couldn't do it. I just kept rolling so poorly that he kept surviving. I think it took probably three turns of combats back and forth to finally finish him off. And meanwhile, my dragon mage couldn't do anything because he couldn't shoot fireballs out of the combat into something else. He kept trying to cast Flaming Sword of Ruin on himself to make him better in combat, and either he dispelled it or just wasn't working. I remember it was so frustrating. It might have been the first time I ever used the dragon mage. And it was just like, why won't these dwarves die? It was ridiculous, but so I rolled the dice. I know my brother was very happy that happened because his one war machine held up a dragon mage for 2 or 3 turns. worth it, even if they died in the end. He wasn't shooting with it either, but it kept the dragon from. The whole point was to take out this war machine and then go into flanks of other units to support my infantry and cavalry moving up the middle, and it just didn't work at all. It was very disappointing. But other than dragon mages, we have some nobles of very high rank, princes, and I forgot the word. What is the hero choice equivalent? Whereas a high elf prince would be a lord choice. High elf noble, just noble. Okay, high elf noble is our hero choice. They can ride the other dragons. So they can ride a sun dragon as well. Older, larger, more tired dragons are known as sun dragons. Sorry, sun dragons are the young ones. Moon dragons, and they often have things like this image I have in the video here would be a moon dragon, probably because it has yellow scales. These are dragons, kind of the mid range in terms of age of dragons and size. And then the most powerful lords of Ulthuan can potentially wake and ride and have the respective star dragons, which are called star dragons because they're as old as the stars themselves. And these are the biggest, the mightiest, the wisest dragons out there, and they are like an army unto themselves. The last few years I've been playing Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I've really enjoyed just taking a high elf prince on a star dragon just because they are disgustingly powerful. They're not. It's not a great use of points. If you're playing, to give you an idea, if you're not familiar with Warhammer Fantasy Battles, if you are playing a typical 2,000 or 2,400 point game, a high elf prince on a star dragon. So the prince himself is 140 points, very typical for a lord level choice, and you're probably going to have up to 100 points of magic items on him. And then the star dragon itself is 390 points. And you can't change them. There's no options for the dragons. Just you can take a sun, star, or moon or star dragon, and the star dragon is just so much more expensive, but it's so awesome. To give you an idea, a sun dragon is 235 points, a moon dragon is 300 points, and the star dragon is 390 points. They also could ride a griffin for 150, so way cheaper than any of the dragons, or a great eagle for 50, or just a regular elven steed for a whole 20 points. But I love taking the Star Dragon just because it can rip apart units on its own. It had like 7 attacks, strength 7, toughness 7, 7 wounds, which is a lot for that game, and it was just fun to see how your opponent had to react to this massive dragon that could just tear things apart. That, of course, also caused terror, so things run away from it. It could breathe fire only once a game, which sucked, but if you did it at the right time, it could be devastating. Love these guys. And their Thunderstomp. Can't forget Thunderstomp. D6 strength 7 hits. Yes! As long as Taylor didn't kill it randomly with a goblin rock lobber. Star Dragon you couldn't, though, because those things at best could do D6 damage, so you can only take it down to 1. There were so many times where I had a Frostspire Phoenix. The older Phoenixes, which I guess we could talk about those right now. Has 5 wounds, so he would hit it with a stupid rock and it would just die because he would always roll 5 or 6 for the damage, and it would just be this 250 point model just gone before he even had a turn. That happened more than once. And I would get so mad because it was so frustrating. But yeah, I think that's about it. Did I bring up the actual picture of dragon princes on their steeds? I think I did. But yeah, we'll talk about the other magical creatures while we're talking about dragons. The phoenixes are super cool. I like what they did with phoenixes in fantasy battles, where it's not just reborn of fire. I like the idea that these are giant. These would be probably enormous monsters in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, with huge wingspans, probably 50 feet across or so, and they have Flamespire phoenixes and Frostheart phoenixes. And these things are super cool because as they age, they get colder, and that's where we get Frostheart phoenixes that are all icy. I think I showed off mine briefly last episode, my model of it that wasn't ever finished painted. And as they get older and older, they get kind of tougher and slower and covered in ice, and they turn from fiery reds and yellows to icy blues and purples. And then when they finally die, they can be reborn into the Flamespire Phoenix, of course, as phoenixes do. And I like how they did these in the game, where the Flamespire Phoenix could fly over. Ooh, excuse me. Could fly over units and just do fire damage to them from their like fiery wake, like Rodan from Godzilla. Whereas Frostheart Phoenixes had this aura of ice and cold to the point where they could slow units down, and they were great support pieces. I think if you were within, if you were if you were enemy unit in combat with the Frostheart Phoenix, you would have the always strikes last rule and suffer -1 to strength, which was super cool as the ice around it just sapped your strength. Or they had to be in base contact, but you know what I mean. Close enough. So it was really cool when they added those, and some characters could ride phoenixes as well. We'll get to that when we talk about the Phoenix Guard. So that is it for Caledor. We're going to continue our move around the island. We'll bring that map back up. As we come back to the southern part, we have the Kingdom of Eataine, which is described as a hinterlands, which is really just a kingdom that supports the great city of Lothern, the capital city of Ulthuan, the biggest and mightiest port city in the world. And Eataine, mostly, again, kind of populated by nobles that live in like villas around in the foothills of the Anuli Mountains here. And then just Lothern, a huge, huge city. The description of this place is cool. So we have the Straits of Lothern are a very important part. I'm going to blow up this section of the map. Whoop. So this most southernmost part of the island, we have the Straits of Lothern. I guess not the oh, you know, before we go too much more into Eataine, I forgot to talk about Val's Anvil over in Caledor, which would be one of the most southernmost points of the nation. And this is the mightiest volcano in Ulthuan. It's called Val's Anvil, and it is there where the great mages of Caledor create powerful magic artifacts. And it's a lot of here they create what's called dragon armor that the dragon princes wear, which is Ithalmar armor that has been forged in the fires of Val's Anvil, where no other fire can harm the wearer of this armor that is less than the fires of the Forge of Val. Val being the smith god of the elves. And this in the Fantasy Battles game that translated to anybody that wore dragon armor had a 2+, so you'd roll 2 or higher on a d6, and you wouldn't take damage for anything that had flaming attacks, which I thought was super cool. I love that stuff. So Val's Forge it's very secluded. It's on this small island we can see on the map here. You can only get to by a narrow silver bridge or bridge of what's called true steel. It's kind of like the next best metal they had after Ithalmar and Adamite. What do they call it in this world? I think it's the dwarves call it Gromril, humans call it star metal. Amantine, I can't remember now. I forgot what it was called. That's kind of it's similar to Ithalmar, and then it's super super hard, but it's much heavier, and the elves don't usually use that. Like the dwarves love to wear Gromril armor because they don't care about being slowed by the weight of it, whereas elves prefer the Ithalmar so they can still be fast. All right, let's go back to Eataine and Lothern. So Eataine, where did my flag for Eataine go? There it is. So Eataine has the most complex crest flag that we've seen, where we have what I'm assuming is a phoenix coming up from burning embers, raising its wings high. We have a pyramid behind it, at the summit of which is a bright shining sun, just resplendent in all its glory. And then we have a few runes about. I believe we have the rune of the ever-burning flame at the bottom. So I just saw that one a moment ago. Boop, 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 boop. I'll flip through our book one more time. There we go. That is the symbol of Acer, which is what the High Elves call themselves. The Eternal Flame, the mark of Assyrian, the symbol of rebirth and lordship, of course, is on the capital, the flag of the capital nation. We have another one above that looks like an eye, which I don't see among this chart. It looks very similar to the Quill Isha again, which I think shows that relationship between the Phoenix King, which would the mark of Acer would kind of represent, and the Ever Queen we saw on the crest of Avelorn, to show that they kind of ruled together but separate. And then we have a what is that called? It just left my head, with the black and white opposite, and then there's a dot of the other color in each side. Yin Yang, the Yin Yang symbol. On the other side of the crest, we have kind of sun and moon together as well, to show this relationship they have with both things. Thank you. Danny just said Yin Yang. Yeah. Whew. That hurt my head for a second there. Again, just left. So, Eataine. I'm going to bring the map back up so we can look at Lothern. So the Straits of Lothern are the only way to get to the Inner Sea without crossing over the island itself and crossing the Inuli Mountains. So the Straits of Lothern are super, super important for the High Elves to defend. If an enemy navy was able to sail through here, they could go to the Inner Sea and attack from inside, which would be really bad, as the High Elves are not really prepared for that. So the Straits of Lothern, first we have the Glittering Tower, which is a massive lighthouse that has thousands of lights in it, that is always manned by hundreds of the Lothern Sea Guard, which are often taken, not exclusively, but often taken from the realm of Kothic, we talked about last week, the northeastern outer kingdom, known for their navy. The Sea Guard are basically the navy elves of the nation, and Lothern is where they're often garrisoned to defend the capital here. So the Glittering Tower is full of these elves that are trained to fight with spear and shield, as well as the bow. And it's also just festooned with repeater bolt throwers that can fire one massive bolt or 6 smaller ones to clear the decks of ships as they attack, whereas the larger bolts they can fire singly to pierce the hulls of ships to help them, to make them sink. Along with this, the Straits of Lothern are big old cliffs on either side that are, again, just covered with platforms with more bolt throwers and bow elves. And then we have the first gate you have to enter to get even into the Straits is the Emerald Gate, which is typically left closed, and you're only allowed in if you're okayed, basically. Merchants are allowed in, and things of that nature. As you go through, if you are able to break through the Emerald Gate somehow, there's even more defensive positions before you reach the Sapphire Gate, which, again, will only be opened for those that are allowed in. And once you get through there, you reach the city of Lothern, which is all around this lagoon past the gates. Let me double check I had those gates right. There's a third gate. Right? So we have the Emerald Gate, then the Sapphire Gate, which of course is studded with giant sapphires. Okay, so the Sapphire Gate, yes. So you have the Emerald Gate before you get into the Straits of Lothern, and then you have the Sapphire Gate before the city of Lothern itself, so they can trap enemy navies in there and just pummel them with bolts and arrows, and before they could even potentially fight their way through the Sapphire Gate to get into the lagoon that is the city of Lothern. So here is a really cool place where it's giant lagoon on either side of the straits, where it comes back to another point uh, called the we have the Everwatch Towers nearby, but here we have a third gate that anybody that's not a native Ulthuan is not allowed through. So even human traders that come here from the Empire or Marienburg or Bretonia or Norska or anything like that are not allowed past the walls of Lothern for like no matter what. Only elves are allowed to step beyond that realm, which compared to the entire continent, of course, is tiny. But Lothern is a massive city that has just as many non-elves as elves anymore. The Phoenix King before Finubar, um, I just thought his name, Bel Hathor. When he first started as a Phoenix King, he decreed that no humans were allowed to step foot on Ulthuan at all. And Finubar was like, well, maybe we should learn more about these people. They used to be barbarians, and it was only a couple hundred years ago that they were able to become seafarers and become a threat to us at all. So Bel Hathor said, all right, well, you know what we'll do? We'll get a bunch of mages to make it really, really difficult to get to Ulthuan. So we have now those cloying mists that surround the continent island and make it nearly impossible for ships to make it through. And Finubar said, I'm going to go to this place, to the place where these humans are coming from, and learn about them. So he sails to the Empire and stays in the old world for 50 years. He gets to know the Bretonians, he gets to know Imperials, he meets the Wood Elves of Avelorn, and he just learns that the humans, while he found them barbaric and disgusting, he was also impressed with them. And in his time there, he saw how quickly they were multiplying. And he said, you know what? These people could be a big problem if we decided to make them our enemies. Their technology, while crude, is potent. They had things like cannon already, which the High Elves don't use black powder, so it was kind of amazing to them, this new technology they had, and they saw the destructive potential of it as well. So Finubar stayed in the old world for 50 years, learning about these people. He came back to Ulthuan, and he kind of made his report to Bel Hathor, and he decided, you know what, with this new information, we'll allow them into Lothern, and we'll trade with them, and we'll treat them as allies instead of enemies because we don't need more enemies. They already had dark elves. They already had other different humans. They have the monsters that live among them and the demons of chaos and all that. And they said we need more allies as our race is in trouble. So they allowed humans into Lothern only, and again they said no more than that. We're not going to potentially let them settle here or anything like that, but there are just as many humans and dwarves and things like that are allowed to a small degree in Lothern as there are elves. It is now the strongest, most powerful trading city in the world because of this, and it has led to a new age of like prosperity for the elves, being able to trade with all these other nations. They can get all kinds of things now that they couldn't while they kept themselves isolated for thousands of years. So when Bel Hathor died of old age, because elves they're not immortal, they can live for thousands of years. He did rule from the imperial calendar time of 1503 to 2163. So this guy ruled for actually not that long. It's only like 600 years. Oh, 661 years. He was known as Bel Hathor the Sage. When he died, he recommended the council make Finubar the new Phoenix King, and they agreed. And Finubar became the first Phoenix King to be appointed by the suggestion of his predecessor because of his time with these people and the wisdom he brought back, saying, hey, we need to work with these people instead of against them. They thought he'd be a good Phoenix King, and he has been so far. So more about Finubar in a moment, but talking about, I forgot to bring up the picture of the Lothern Sea Guard. Again, they are trained to be masters of fighting with spear and shield, just like any other spear elf militiamen of the High Elves, but also with the bow, which is super cool to have in the game. Made them too expensive. They're kind of jack of all trades instead of being really good at one thing, but in the fluff, it makes a lot more sense. Also, with the Sea Guard, one of my favorite things they added was called the Lothern Sky Cutter, which was a flying chariot. The chariot was pulled by rocks. Those ROC birds we see in fantasy a lot, giant birds, not quite great eagles. They were a different type of bird, but they were very large. And then they had this chariot chassis that could fit 2 elves that had a small bolt thrower on it, kind of like a ballista, and then another that was crewed by 1 elf and another elf that had spears and bow they could fire from here. Similar to it always reminded me of I guess in Thor: The Dark World, where they had those flying boats. That one of the coolest parts of that movie always reminded me of these sky cutters. Obviously, were magically imbued to have the chariot part itself fly along with the rock. Instead of wheels, they had like fins to help steer it through the air. Super cool. So not only if you're attacking through the Straits of Lothar, do you have to worry about hails of bolt throwers and bows raining down from the cliffs, you have these dudes flying around in chariots that could come right up to the ship and shoot people off of them. Really, really cool. Alrighty, so let me bring up our map one more time here. We'll take a look at if you're a high elf that is allowed past Lothern. Oh, I forgot. With the Lagoon of Lothern is a big circle essentially, and around this lagoon, not only is the city on it on all sides, but we got these really cool statues of all the elven gods. So there's Asuryan, Lilieth, which is kind of the goddess of magic, Kurnos, the god of the hunt. We have Isha and others such as Cain, Vol, and it says at dusk, when the sun is setting, all the statues briefly glow white, blaze with white flame, except for Cain, of course, being the god of blood and murder, death and murder. His hands and eyes glow blood red, which is just a super cool image. All the other gods are glowing this white fire, except Cain. Which, in the old world, Cain's worship has even kind of made its way over there. It is illegal to worship Cain in the old world, where Cain is a big deal among dark elves. We'll talk about in a future episode. Among the high elves, he's still respected as the god of death is important, but the dark elves have kind of bastardized that worship to also include he's also the god of murder, which high elves aren't really about. They're more about political intrigue and metaphorically stabbing one's rivals in the back, whereas dark elves, of course, are much more literal about that and will stab a rival in the back with a nasty dagger at any opportunity. But I brought the map up to look. If we continue past the Straits of Lothar into the Inner Sea, continuing due north, you will get to one of the most important islands of the High Elves, where the Shrine of Asuryan is. And it is kind of seen as a rite of passage that every elf of Ulthuan will make a pilgrimage to the Shrine of Asuryan sometime during their life, and some of them will take that one step further, and they will go into a special chamber, which name I forget off the top of my head. It's probably like the Hall of Asuryan or something. The Shrine, yes, the Chamber of Days. Super, super important, where actually on the walls of this room are laid out past, present, and future. But if a high elf is to read these words, to learn the future, they also learn the future they will learn the time and place of their own death. And these elves become the Phoenix Guard, one of my probably my favorite unit in the high elf army. They were like the heavy infantry. They have halberds, so they hit a bit harder, but they were the tanks of the high elves, where because of this, they ruled it in the game. They had a 4 upward save. So anytime they took a wound on a 4+ on a d6, they didn't take that wound and they survived, which made them very tanky for elves. And the Phoenix Guard, once they read the walls of the Chamber of Days, take a magical oath to never speak again, because they cannot reveal the future that they have read. So in the game, because they march to war completely silently, it completely unnerves any enemies, and they cause fear, which is kind of cool. Different way to do it. They weren't like scary. It's their stoic silence that was unnerving to enemies. So the Phoenix Guard work as, first off, protectors of the Shrine of Asuryan. They revere the god Asuryan above all other elf gods, which most elves do anyway, as the creator god. but because of this oath they take, they become they are such strict followers of the word of Assyrian that they become the Phoenix King's emissaries. If the Phoenix King does not ride to war himself, he is the only one that has any power to tell the Phoenix Guard what to do. And if they march to battle, it's the every other elf sees it as if the Phoenix King is there with them, kind of in spirit, but in the body of these other elves. And they are incredibly proficient warriors. They are some of the best on the island, other than probably like Teclis and maybe the Swordmasters could be argued. But it's more about their presence on the battlefield. Um, the highest ranking Phoenix Guard is known as the Anointed of Assyrian, and these are the guys that can ride phoenixes, which is super cool. They can ride a Flame Spire or a Frostheart Phoenix. Really awesome. They can use these as mounts into battle. And then we have my favorite, mostly because of I like his name a lot. I loved his model and his rules. Is Caledor, the captain of the Phoenix Guard. And he's got a kind of cool story where he was like the epitome of haughty, arrogant elf noble, and he was just kind of a jerk. And he went on his pilgrimage to the Shrine of Assyrian later in his life, and he kind of was blasphemous and broke his it's described as stole his way into the Chamber of Days and came out a changed elf. He had the rune of Assyrian on his forehead, the same one we saw on the crest of Eataine. He came out, of course, he never spoke again, but he did forsake all of his lands and possessions as a noble and became one of the Phoenix Guard. And during this time, he rose up in the ranks of the Phoenix Guard to the point where he became their current captain. He's got a cool story where during the Battle of Finubar Plain, which was kind of the high elf, I think I talked about this last time with the first episode of the high elf coverage with Tyrion and Teclis. He Where it was this huge fight with Malkuth himself, uh, just outside of the forests of Avelorn. Caledor rode to war on Frostheart Phoenix Ashtari, and during the fight, Ashtari got a little overzealous and picked a fight with a black dragon of Nagaroth called Corzandarar. Corzan, I thought I had this. Corzanar, Corzarandar. I don't know, a big black dragon, and he was outmatched. A phoenix is big and mighty, but not quite the same as a black dragon of Nagaroth, and it was only because Caledor was riding this thing that they were able to defeat it. And of course, Caledor knew that he was going to win this fight. Wasn't the time of his death, so that was pretty awesome. The big thing about him I really liked in his rules is that he had the Phoenix Blade. His halberd is a magical halberd that gave him a further +1 strength. Oh no, it's +1 strength because it's a halberd, and had the flaming attacks. So it was a flaming halberd, and it gave him multiple wounds D3, so he could fight big things and potentially he could fight an ogre and kill it in one swipe, instead of just doing 1 damage with every attack. So super cool. I like Caledor a lot. As we're talking about the capital, we talked a little bit about Finubar. So this is a concept art. We don't really have any artwork of Finubar from like the army books. I complained in other episodes, half jokingly, that we can in the Warhammer Fantasy Battles game you could play as the overall ruler of pretty much every race. You could play as Malkuth for the Dark Elves. You could play as Thorgrim Grudgebear for the Dwarves. Karl Franz for the Empire. King Lewin Leoncoeur for the Bretonnians. Even Grease's Goldtooth for the Ogres. You could play as Grimgor Ironhide, the best dark black orc war boss we've ever seen. You could play as Orion, the literal god for the Wood Elves. But you never had Finubar, the Seafarer, and that drove me crazy. And it's not like he never went to war. He not so in his early days of his rule, he ruled from. If we look at the imperial calendar, of course, I like how the High Elves do, where they count like their years in what Phoenix King it is. So Finubar ruled from year one of his rule to present. But Imperial calendar, it was from 2163 to the present, which I'd like to count the present as the time of the Storm of Chaos, which was 2522. So he's been ruling the High Elves for, we'll say, roughly 400 years, a little bit less. In the early years of his rule, the first few decades, he got a lot of slack. I was talking earlier about how he was often not on Ulthuan. He wasn't ruling directly. He was traveling the world, which is why he got the name the Seafarer. And he wanted to learn. He wanted to learn more about the world at large because now Ulthuan was a part of that once again. After Bel Hathor, the Phoenix King before him, opened up Ulthuan's Lothern at least to trade with other nations. He thought, well, we need to know more about this world if we're going to survive in it, if we can thrive again. During his time, there was the Great Incursion of Chaos, with the Battle of Finubar Plain and all that, where the Dark Elves saw that as an opportunity to try to take over Ulthuan again. During his reign was the time Teclis went to... I think I referred to Teclis as the Great Warrior earlier. It was Tyrion is with Elariel. I think I said that wrong before. Teclis went to the Empire to train humans how to use magic, helped Magnus the Pious fight off the Great Incursion, and part of that was Finubar's idea, I believe, to help. He was like, if we're going to have humans as an ally, they need to be stronger and they need to know how to use magic. And that was when magic was no longer illegal in the Empire after that. But Finubar's had a rough time of it, in that they were hoping that with his reign would be the new era of peace, with new trade between other kingdoms and other peoples. But because of the darkness spreading through the world, his reign has become a time of unbridled war. I think it might be another coming of the forces of chaos, which, of course, the End Times covers that in more detail. I don't talk about that on this show because I never read a lot about the End Times, and I'm not gonna, because I don't like it. They destroyed my favorite fantasy world. I'm not gonna talk about it much. So there's probably more with Finubar there. I know some bits about it where, like, Malekith, it was revealed that when he went through the flames, it was somebody like sabotaged it, so he should have been the next Phoenix King after Ellyrion. I think he does walk through it at some point and becomes like an avatar of the gods, and I think Finubar gets struck down or something. I don't know. I really don't like how they flipped like every character. Oh, this was a bad guy, now he's a good guy. This was a good guy, oh, now he's a bad guy. I feel like they did that way too much with the little I know about the End Times. I like to think that the Storm of Chaos that was kind of retconned into the End Times was kind of the end of the progression of the story of the Warhammer world. So with the Old World game coming out someday, they've already said that it's going to take place like 300 years in the past, before the End Times. So like before even the Great Incursion with Magnus, which will be really interesting. I wonder how they're going to do. How are you going to have? You're not going to have like battle mages in the Empire then, because that wasn't around. But we'll learn more about that as we get closer. I do believe that's it for today and it for the High Elves. I think that's it. I think that's all. Whew. I'm tired. My throat hurts from all that talking. Next week, I got a request in the Discord. Oh, I can't remember who it was, and now I feel bad because they were asking if I was planning on covering the Kislev anytime soon. I said, you know what? I didn't have plans yet for after High Elves, so let's do that. So next week will be Kislev, one of my favorite areas, strictly because it's the lands of ice and snow, and I always love anything that has to do with ice. So I'm going to be reading about that a bunch. I got a book here from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition. If I can find it real quick. Realm of the Ice Queen. This will be my number one source for all things Kislev next week. Super cool book. Love ice witches. Real fun stuff. I'm gonna try to find that so I can give that person credit who requested Kislev. Who was it? Might be looking in the wrong chat. While I'm looking that up, I'll talk about, of course, our release schedule for the week. I think I forgot to do that last couple weeks. Sundays, of course, is Grim Streamer Perilous Lore. You can join me live at twitch.tv/professional casual network at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A week later, it goes up on the Patreon for the podcast version. I believe that's $5 tier and up. I'm not positive. And then the YouTube version goes up for free, of course, 2 weeks later, where I'd love to hear what people want to hear more about. Mondays, we have the Lost Omens podcast, where Danny is our GM for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. She's running us knuckleheads through the Extinction Curse adventure path, and it is so much fun. Even if we've had a lot of people in the Discord talk about how even if they will say, I don't like Pathfinder, I prefer WFRP or even 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and they still love the show because it's not so much about the mechanics of the game, it's about telling a great story, awesome characters, super, super fun, hilarious. My face hurts from laughing 5 minutes into that show every time we record. It's such a good time. It's really hitting its stride as we're going. We recorded episodes 20, I think it was 20 and 20, no, it was even after that, 24, 25, fairly recently. Those are my favorite episodes that were pure RP, the no combat of any kind. We did put a circus performance on, I think episode 26. Super, super fun. Great show. I can't recommend it enough. It's so much fun. Danny does a great job corralling us. 5 guys just having fun around the table. So we get off topic a little bit in character. We get off the plot here and there, but in a good way. Monday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the Power Phase right here on this Twitch. Those episodes also go up on YouTube later on, once Big Chuck can fit it into his schedule with his crazy work stuff. We play Marvel Crisis Protocol, currently my favorite miniatures game out there, mostly because the only person I have to play Warhammer Fantasy Battles with is Taylor, and it's very difficult to schedule that and then find the time to actually get those models on the table. Crisis Protocol is amazing because you have 4 or 5 characters typically per side, and it's a super fun time. We have a great time there. The Discord, the chat on Twitch is always awesome. We have channel points you can redeem to do things in games. You can force us to play without our glasses on, which really only affects me and Tim. Chuck doesn't wear glasses. Danny doesn't wear glasses. So really it's just to mess with me and Tim. You can do things like ban an in-game action. You can buy re-rolls for people and just have, we don't try to play a competitive game. Like, we're not there to play like tournament lists. We're there to have a good time, and it's super fun. I highly recommend that as well. This week being tomorrow, April 18th, we have Danny is playing Big Chuck, which would be fun to actually somebody other than Tim is gonna play. Tuesdays we have our pretty new, we call it, Charlie likes to call it a pavlog. It started as just a podcast, and we've made it a video as well called Wait, Did I Roll a Wild? We talk about Crisis Protocol. We typically recap the game from that week. We talk about any news that has popped up during the week. Make predictions that are usually wrong, and again, just have a good time talking about a game we love. So that is, podcast version is out there. Oh, Wait, Did I Roll a Wild? And it is on YouTube every Tuesdays. Wednesday is our Patreon day, where patrons get bonus stuff. We have regular vlogs. Danny does book reviews. Big Chuck does all kinds of whatever he feels like that week. He's done his blind reaction to the Mortal Kombat trailer that he's super excited about. Sometimes he does his tasty treats, little reviews of snack foods, all kinds of stuff. Tim will do State of the Nation, State of the Network updates and things like that when we have big news, all kinds of fun stuff. Patreon is where you will have access to videos to all of our podcasts that go up the same day the podcast goes up. So Lost Omens podcast, if you want to see all of us playing the game and Danny running it, that goes up on Mondays with the show on the Patreon. But the Grim Podcast of Pros Adventure video is there. The Elite 8 Showdown video is there on Fridays. And then on Wednesdays, this coming Wednesday, where's my calendar? I don't know what day that is. So Monday's the 19th, so the 21st, will be the Patreon release of episode 1 of Settling the Southlands, which is our kind of Patreon exclusive, much very early access to the video version. The podcast version will also be on Patreon exclusively for our my homebrewed campaign with a new party of adventurers heads to the Southlands to try to establish an imperial colony, which so far has been fantastic. I'm blown away by the role playing and the characters that everybody's come up with. Talked about the back at the beginning of the show, but that'll be Wednesday, every other Wednesday for now until we get enough to make it every Wednesday. So even more content on Wednesdays. Thursdays is a grim podcast of Perilous Adventure, my baby. We're playing The Enemy Within, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition. Such a good show. I can't recommend that one enough either. It's just good. It's just so good. I love it. I give so much credit to the players for making that the show that it is. It's awesome. Episode 50 is coming up soon. That is going to be not this coming Thursday, which would be the 22nd. That'll be the next week, which I think I can't picture a calendar in my head well enough. That'll be the 29th. Our final episode of April will be episode 50. We got a supersized 2-hour long episode to celebrate that. And then Friday is Elite 8 Showdown. Big Chuck, that's his baby, and Tim, sometimes guests, like Ben from the Lost Omens and his own podcasts. He does the Cartoon Cast, where he does deep dives on cartoons, and the Watchtower, where he's talking about the Justice League cartoon in depth, episode by episode breakdown. But Big Chuck and Tim every week on Elite 8 go over an 8-subject single elimination bracket. They talk about anything and everything. Last week, Ben was the guest. They talked about the best side character, I think is how they worded it. Best side character from King of the Hill. This coming Friday, the 23rd, will be the best character from King of the Hill, where the winner for the best side character bracket will kind of be that wild card 8th spot there, which I've never really watched King of the Hill. I've seen snippets of episodes here and there. I don't know who they're talking about most of the time, and it's still an entertaining show. Those guys are too funny and just ridiculous, and I recommend that, of course, but not with your kids. Not appropriate for kids at all. Things like Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure in this show, I keep more like PG-13. They do not do that on Elite 8, so viewer discretion is advised. I will say. Other than that's our week. Saturdays are kind of our release day off, just because it's already enough content. Don't be greedy. Maybe someday, but we're not doing that now. I'll say other than that, thanks for joining, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, however it is that you are getting this. Let me know any requests or any other questions you have. Next week will be Kislev, and I'll say, keep gaming. Bye.